Bramburrow back with some Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, our Austria-Hungary campaign that we began in 1910, and we're now to January 1915, 5 years in. We have fought both Italy and France, actually had a peace treaty with France, and picked up a few ports. Our last, and we're now at peace. Everybody's at peace. And the last episode was taken up with some refits and some new ship designs. It's kind of to take the post-war Austrian Navy into the future. And we're now building and refitting a lot of ships. We've got two kind of small. They're not cheap by any stretch, but I've got two small tonnage battleships building specifically so that two can fit into the 48,000 tons of the newly acquired port of Bizerta. A whole bunch of a new class of DDs, which are quite heavily gunned, I gotta say. I don't know when we're going to have a war, but I'm looking forward to seeing those things in action. And we're also refitting most of our capital ships for things like stereoscopic rangefinders and things like that. The politics situation is such that I don't think we're going to war with anybody soon. We're friends with everybody, at least a little bit, even France. And so the kind of near to midterm plan is finish these ships, get them built up, kind of make sure that the Navy is up to snuff, and then I'm gonna start kind of putting a lot of task forces out here in the West Med and see if maybe we can't make some relations deteriorate and get back into a war with Italy or France. And the reason for that is not necessarily for warmongering's sake. I mean, ideally, the most successful Navy or military in general is one that is strong enough to never have to go to war, right? But that would be a boring campaign, wouldn't it? But looking ahead long term, the idea is Austria-Hungary, even with the acquisition of these ports, Austria-Hungary's kind of biggest Achilles heel in this game, actually in a pretty favorable position. At first it didn't really become clear to me, but Austria-Hungary's got a pretty nice position here in the East Med, because France has no presence at campaign start. France has no presence at all. UK has a tiny one. You know, these Limassol and Valletta. And, you know, there's only one real peer in the East Med, and that's Italy. And so you've only got really one naval power to really worry about having a war with, in the sense that if the war doesn't go your way, Italy is the country against whom that is a real problem, right? Because if one fights a war against France over here in the West Med, and things don't go so hot, well, you can just kind of pull back, right, into the East Med, and it's not that big a deal. But Austria, that's not quite as true now, because we actually have ports in the West Med. But these are essentially colonial, right? Recently acquired possessions that were French and now aren't. You know, this isn't homeland Austria-Hungary over here. And if these particular ports get blockaded, I don't know if that's a big deal or not. To be honest, I'm not really sure how blockade works now with the multiple countries and the multiple sea regions. I mean, I understand the mechanics of the power projection, but You know, what does it take for Austria-Hungary to actually get blockaded per se? I assume it still means that a hostile power or a combination of hostile powers have more power projection in the East Med, more than twice as much power projection than we do, and that's what causes us to get blockaded. But what about France, right? They have ports in the West Med, ports in the North Atlantic, ports in the English Channel. If I want to blockade France, I guess I have to get, in conjunction with my allies, more than twice as much power projection in all 3 sea regions before France is blockaded. That's what I would think. In any case, long term, what I don't want to have happen is Italy dissolves, France dissolves, and it's only Austria-Hungary and the UK remaining. And if that happens, I don't want to get caught with only a few ports and simply unable to have a nearly as large a fleet. On the other hand, just because Italy dissolves does not mean, it's not necessarily a zero-sum game, in the sense that, you know, Germany dissolved, but these are not British ports, right? There's still a void here. So if Italy and France dissolve, that doesn't necessarily mean that a still active power gets all these ports in their port capacities. Like right now, if Italy and France dissolved, I think it'd just be like a bunch of neutral, empty ports like these up here in Germany. And we'd have a situation where, I don't know if Austria-Hungary and Britain would ever go to war. Because we wouldn't have a presence up here, and they wouldn't have much of a presence down here. Matter of fact, despite having British and Austro-Hungarian ports in the East Med, our relations in the East Med specifically keep increasing with the UK. Anyway, so that's kind of what I intend to do, but that's going to take some time. We've got a bunch of ships to build, we've got some ships to refit. Even when these ships are done, this shipbuilding program is primarily targeted to making use of the port capacity in our new ports. We will still have some capacity in our home ports up here, so there may be a little bit more shipbuilding that goes on. In any case, I'm going to kind of click through some months here. I don't think I'm going to show every single event, and I will be back when I think that there is something worthy of showing. Okay, so we've proceeded about 6 months, and just to give a snapshot of kind of the way things are going, relations are deteriorating with France, and that is not because of my actions. France has got several task forces, well, 2, I guess, operating in the East Med, actually up here in the Adriatic. And so we've been getting these monthly relations deteriorations with France. So we're headed toward an eventual conflict there, I think. Most of our refits are done. We've just got 2 battle cruisers that are finishing up that last refit, and those are complete. We've still got shipbuilding going on. However, I think our destroyers are very close to completion. Yeah, just got 1 month left on that entire, all these Lika class destroyers. Only a month. I have the 4 cruisers that are 1 month from completion, and I suspended them. The idea here is that we've got a little reserve of cruisers that I can pop out quickly in response to battle losses or what have you. But they're not this represents about 60,000 tons of port capacity that that they're not occupying. So if I feel like I need them, I can complete them. So they're kind of a reserve. The other option that I could do is complete them and then put them in mothballs. And what that will do is they will have a very low cost for maintenance because there's no crews on them. And it's not zero though. I think it would be like maybe 10 or 20% of their normal in-being maintenance cost. What I don't know is, do ships in mothball count toward port capacity? You know what? Let's find out. Let's go ahead and complete the Traun. Is that how that would be pronounced? The Traun? And let's got some room there in Pula. Actually, is our port capacity coming up a little bit? It is. Even Bizerta is up. It's about 2,000 tons more than it was 6 months ago. So port capacity is slowly increasing, which is a good thing. So right now we have 244,861 tons of ships home ported in Pula, 12 CAs. I'm sure many viewers know the answer to this. It's been a while since I played, and mechanics could have changed, and so I don't know the answer to this. So let's go ahead and complete Traun in Pula. And next month, when she completes, I will zero the crew and mothball it in advance another month and see how it reflects. Yeah, you can see there how relations are deteriorating with France in the East Med specifically. Now somehow we have stopped improving relations with Britain in the East Med, but they're improving in the West Med. And actually our relations are improving with France in the West Med, kind of counteracting the deterioration in the East Med. So that seems a little strange. Okay, Ultimatum, financial compensation for our discovered acts of espionage. Hey, Navy Minister, what do you think about that? Well, Prime Minister, I'm not... No. No. That's better. And no, yeah. Saber-Rattling response will be fine. High tensile steel, that's a good, that seems like a useful tech. Now this minus 6% armor weight, one could argue you could just go refit, just go in, make a refit. Don't change anything. Just hit the refit button and then resave. And all else about that ship will be identical, except it will be lower tonnage. Is that how this works? I don't know. Or is it even, does it even apply to existing ships? Just kind of across the board, across all ships. If I had memorized, or if I had written down all of the tons of all the ships, I could answer that. But I didn't. So I could look at a battle cruiser right now, or whatever, and I wouldn't be able to tell. Okay. Armed merchant cruisers. I don't think this is implemented yet. And it would be abstracted. This would apply kind of to the monthly transport losses, which none are happening right now because there's no wars. Okay, so in Pula, yep, we're now shown as 13 CAs, 268, 857 tons. So now, this is where all the DDs are. Going to the fleet, where is Trown? It is here. Set the crew to 0. Crew amount 0. Ship status will be set to mothballed. And before we do that, though, so right now Trown in in-being mode is $346,000 a month in cost. And I just noticed something there in the tooltip. Well, it's right there. So they have been trying in the various updates to get crew training to a point where it's impossible to get a ship's crew up higher than trained without actually seeing combat. And I think we see an example right there that they have not yet fully completed cooking that omelet. Because Trown has been under construction, just now completed, brand new ship. And the crew training is seasoned. Right? Yeah, it should have come into the fleet at cadet level. Or at least at trained level, right? The ship, you know, the ship is constructing. I guess the idea is it's got its crew and they're training while the ship is building. I mean, that happens, right? They don't just couple up a bunch of guys on the day that the ship is commissioned. And the other 3 cruisers in that class, they're all at trained. So at very least, Troun should not have commissioned at anything higher than trained, but here she is seasoned. How about all these Leica class destroyers? What are they at? Seasoned, seasoned. They're all seasoned. And they just completed last month. So they've got more work. Matter of fact, they may have completed that same month. I think they're all new too. No more than a month old. So they still have more work to do on that. Right, so let's mothball Troun and see how she affects tonnage in Pula on the next turn. More deteriorated relations with France in the East Med, but improved relations in the West Med. And it looks like France is in Italy are deteriorating as well. Okay, so Pula. Okay. Well, yeah, so that ship still counts, I guess. Because we still have the same amount of tonnage. And we're still showing 13, not 12 CAs. But is that 13th CA counting toward power projection? It is not. Because I had 28 CAs before Troun was built. Let me count those. 5 plus 11, that's 16. Yeah. Okay, so a mothballed ship sucks up port capacity, but does not contribute to power projection, which makes sense. That's I think that's as it should be. So yeah, it's better to, if one wants a reserve, to quickly have some more ships available. It's better to have the lower cost option is to suspend some and then break them out rather than complete and then mothball. And there you have it. In mothball status, it's only costing $103,000, roughly less than roughly 30% of what the in-being import maintenance cost was. Okay, well, as long as it's taking up port capacity anyway, let's go ahead and set the crew back up. Okay, well, I'm going to click on through a few more months here. Get all these destroyers sent over to their West Med home ports for which they were intended. And I'll come back with a snapshot of how things are going sometime early in 1916. Okay, we're into early 1916 now. It is February. And not that much has happened. The trends have continued, but the monthly relations hits with France in the West Med have started happening, and I I'm not sure exactly why, because I haven't moved ships into there. But something has prompted, you know, and -10 for a monthly deterioration in the absence of an event or something. That's pretty big. So we're definitely on the road to war with France, and that will probably occur sometime later this year in 1916. Oh, here's an event. We get to maybe drive relations down more here. Modernization of the French shipyards? I don't think so. What's the best option here? Should also call on France to invest in our shipbuilding. Well, you know, that would give us GDP and more naval budget. Wouldn't actually cost us any money as the Navy. We'd lose some prestige, but we got 379. That we could afford that. I don't know if I want +5 unrest though. Our unrest situation is good. Man, that GDP and naval budget, it's not often. There's quite a few events that give you one or the other. It's pretty rare to get an event that offers both naval budget percentage and GDP growth. For that reason, that is a tempting choice. We could afford the nerfs and +5 relations. With the way things are going, +5 relations with France is kind of a little speed bump. I don't think it would really reverse the trend. Let's see what the other choices are. Modernize our own shipbuilding. We get money, we get percentage, what we lose GDP. I'm not going to do that. Or we just go complete Saber-Rattling. This is the best short-term solution. It gets us where we want to go with picking another fight with France. We get prestige. We zero out our unrest. In the short term, this is the best choice. In the longer term, this is the best choice. I think both of these are very good options. I'm going to take the long-term choice. I'm going to choose the GDP and the naval budget. Oh, and apparently Romania is a thing. Military crisis. Shall we take advantage of it and strengthen our influence? Don't like that. Well, or do I like that? Since we just bumped up our unrest. Okay, let's table that for a second. Don't like this. Uh-oh, we'd have -5 relations with Romania. That would be tragic. I'm gonna. We're at unrest 7, which is still single digits, but let's try to drive this back down. Let's. And 20 million in naval funds is not a lot. Advanced battleship funnels. Okay, good. That'll eventually come in useful whenever we do another design or potentially a refit, I guess. Electric steering gear 2. I don't like the pure electrics though, because you know it impacts flash fire, traverse speed, water pumping, ship repairs. And I gotta say, it's not entirely clear to me why. How does a different steering gear contribute to flash fire chance? I don't get that. And also turret traverse speed, water pumping, ship repairs, that's kind of a stretch too. Although at least for these, one could make the argument, well, if you've got like this huge completely electrically powered steering gear, you know, there's only so much electrical generation capacity on the ship. Right? You got X number of generators. You know, probably the main ones are steam generated, right? They're powered by steam from the boilers. And then possibly, I don't know about this time period, but there's probably some auxiliary diesel powered generators for emergency use. But either way, the ship only has so much electrical generation capacity, and if the steering gear sucks up a lot of that demand, right, increases the electrical load, then I guess that could impact these other things which are going to depend on electrical. Still kind of a stretch, but at least I can sort of see that. I don't understand how it impacts flash fire at all, though. Anyway, I'm off my soapbox on that. Okay, so that's the way things look in February 1916. Let's just have a quick look at the politics. Yeah, we're down to minus 61 with France. How are other things going? Both Austria and France have the highest GDP growth rate. Everyone's pretty high, though, in peacetime. The UK retains the largest economy, but they're growing a little bit slower than France and Austria. All countries are doing well. But Austria is clearly, at least from a naval perspective, and overall, economically as well. I mean, who knows what's happening with the armies, but from an economic and naval perspective, Austria-Hungary is clearly the second power in Europe right now, having eclipsed France and Italy. But everyone's doing well enough that they're players. They're players in the game. Everyone's a threat to everyone else. We also have the second largest navy, 74 ships. So we have a navy about 3/4 of the size of the Royal Navy, and about perhaps 30% larger than either France or Italy's, with 8 capital ships, almost 30 cruisers, and 37 destroyers, which I think is a fairly reasonable proportion. Fairly reasonable. You know, I'm not doing one of those like all battleship runs, which I have done before, and they're fun. And we can't see the overall, but we can look at regions to kind of get an idea of the makeup of enemy force. Oh, France has pulled back from the East Med. Okay. And they have very little presence in the North Atlantic, very, very little presence in the English Channel. So aside from two heavy cruisers, pretty much their entire navy is here. So what are we looking at here? 4 capital ships, 2 battleships, 2 battlecruisers, 11 heavies. So counting the other 2, they have a total of 13 CAs, 21 light cruisers. And then a somewhat similar kind of makeup for Italy, which isn't quite as strong in light cruisers, but has more destroyers. Same number of capital ships. What does Italy have in the East Med? Just one light cruiser. Okay. Right, so that's how things stand in February 1916. I will be back in a few months. Okay, it is May 1916, and we're not quite at war with France yet, but I think it's going to happen quite soon. Relations have continued to deteriorate pretty quickly in the Western Mediterranean, and we are now at 91 negative relations with France. And we've been seeing a clip of about a minus 10 deterioration per month. So I think on the next month we're probably going to get some kind of ultimatum blah 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 event. Meanwhile, though, pretty interestingly, pretty friendly with the UK, plus 48. Now, I don't think that means that we're going to find ourselves in alliance with France against an alliance with the UK against France, because they're also pretty friendly with France. They're kind of buddies with everybody. And I think that's probably because their main competitor was Germany, and Germany's gone, so Britain's just kind of happy with everything the way things are. If I were Britain, did I say Germany? I meant Britain. I think that's obvious. I think the UK is pretty much happy with the state of the world, the state of Europe, and they're just going to watch the three Mediterranean powers duke it out, I guess. Right. So how's our Navy doing? Well, the Navy that we kind of designed and put together, that's all complete now. Has been for a while. No, that's not true. We are still building the two battleships intended to come over here to Bizerta. I think they've got about 6 months remaining, I guess. Can't find them. I know they're not complete yet. Yeah, 4 months remaining on Albert and Luitpold. We've got 29 cruisers as it is. Even with war imminent, I'm not feeling an immediate need to complete those 3 emergency cruisers, if you will. France has pulled back from the East Med. I mean, we've got enormous amounts of power projection here, relatively speaking. Yeah, France has put all their eggs in the West Med basket. They got 22,000 power projection there. They're really ramping up. And, oh, by the way, relations have been deteriorating between France and Italy as well. So there may be kind of a simultaneous... Yeah, see, they're at minus 89. So France could find themselves in a simultaneous war against Italy and Austria-Hungary yet once again. Okay, let's advance and see what happens here in June. Okay, that should put us at minus 100, right? And yeah, there it is. No, that's war between France and Italy. That is just kicking off this month, and somehow, look at this victory point total. That could not have happened immediately upon the start of their war. That's got to be holdover from the previous wars. Right? That can't be correct. Ultimatum, withdraw our fleet, operating near their borders. We're sitting in port, for crying out loud. Threatening their trade lines. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is the war option. Or we could spend money not to have a war. I don't see any point in doing that. Or we could just, like, give them all our money. No, of course we're going to choose this. We are down to 600 million in naval funds, which is still higher than everybody else. But I was about to the point where, under other circumstances, I would have maybe dialed back tech or transports just a little bit to clear this monthly deficit. But hey, we're about to go to war, which means we're going to have a butt ton of money coming into the naval budget. Good for the Navy, not good for the country, right? Because what happens during wartime is the naval budget, and presumably the Army budget too, right? This is just one part of the war. We're fighting the naval piece. So the military budget goes up, but the GDP goes down. So it's not, even though it's like scads of budget for the Navy, we don't necessarily want wars to last forever. Anyway, we'll choose the belligerent option. War! So there's war between France and Italy, which further boosts our... That should send our relations with Italy up above 100, which means they may come looking for an alliance. When that happens, I'm not going to take it. Because eventually, I'd kind of like to fight a war against Italy. And the war between us and France. Okay, new tech. We're up to 12,500 tons light cruiser, which is pretty big. That's a pretty big light cruiser. However, we're not getting new light cruiser hulls. There's still the old armored cruiser and kind of old pre-Dreadnought era light cruiser hulls. I did mention it. I haven't really talked a whole lot about it, though. I haven't built any light cruisers. That's not necessarily because I think light cruisers suck. It's just, you know, I kind of had an idea for what to do for this campaign. In other campaigns, I would build light cruisers. At this point, though, what I'm kind of looking for is the modern light cruiser hulls, right? Where you get away from the casemates and the kind of the restricted hull designs, and you just kind of get a flush deck all the way stem to stern. Those I like. When we get into modern light cruiser designs, which is probably still a few years away, I don't remember exactly, but I would guess sometime in the 20s. Yeah, I'll build some of those. But for now, no, I'm not particularly attracted to this. For one thing, light cruisers tend to be fairly expensive on a per ton basis, like I've talked about with destroyers. You know, the ships are less expensive overall, but on a per tonnage basis, kind of the smaller the ships get, the more you're spending per ton. And that's why I didn't build light cruisers. And I went with the heavy cruisers instead, because ton for ton, they're cheaper. Anyway, enough on that. We're up to 1,600 ton destroyer. You know, I loaded up those Leikas pretty heavily with more guns. I think they were still 200 under, about 200 tons under what we could have built, which means I probably could have put 5.9s on them. But I'm going to go with the Leikas for now, as well as continuing with the older Balatons and Pandors. I'm not going to build any more of them, but we'll keep using them until they're used up. Which, with the way that I play destroyers, may very well occur during this war. But I think I kind of think the next thing I'm looking for in terms of a new design, or at least an extensive refit, would be, I'm kind of surprised I haven't picked up the triple torpedo launcher yet. In other 1910 campaigns, like the Italian campaign I did a few weeks ago, which didn't last very long because of updates, and the first time I tried to start an Austria-Hungary campaign, which was episode 1 of this series, I had triple torpedo launchers available at start in 1910. Did not have that for this campaign start. And 6 years, well, 6.5 years into the campaign, still hasn't come up in the torpedo tech. So I think it's got to be coming sometime fairly soon. And that's probably the next time I'll think about either a new destroyer design or maybe fixing up the Leika with a refit. And I'll replace those 2 double launchers, port and starboard, with 1 centerline triple. Okay. And we have jumped completely ahead to 16-inch Mark 1s. Can't say I'm very excited about that. I would have much rather seen us go into 15-inch and get up into like Mark 2 and 3 of the 15-inch. I mean, somehow if it all zips ahead and we get up to like Mark 3 16-inch pretty quickly, well, fine. I just think that's less likely. For now, I'm still happy with the 12.9s. The tech we're getting in larger guns, we're getting closer to bumping up a level, but we're not there yet. And my philosophy on that, just to articulate that a little bit better, the huge advantage that I pursue, and I think this is, I talk about it all the time, is accuracy. None of the rest of it matters if the accuracy isn't there. Right? Penetration, damage, none of that matters if you're not hitting them. Okay? And the 12.9s still offer us the best balance of accuracy and damage. Now that is slowly eroding, right? As the eras progress, the armor quality and thickness and tonnage of the enemy ships, these 12.9s are going to gradually diminish, right? The accuracy is going to be there, but now we're not quite, the penetration and damage aren't quite keeping up as much anymore. At no point are these larger guns going to be as accurate as the 12.9s with the 20% lengthened barrels, right? That's the sweet spot. That's going to remain the most accurate gun all the way through. But we will reach a point where the bigger guns, the 15s, the 16s, And then later on, like in the 40s, the 18s, they're going to reach a point where they're not as accurate as the smaller guns, but they're accurate enough that their pin and damage will overcome that, and we'll get fewer hits, but still enough hits, and the alpha damage and the pin is just going to more than compensate for it. And so there's a break point there for when to kind of give up a little bit of accuracy for the increased pin and damage. And I don't think we're quite there yet. It's approaching. It's not there yet. Okay. Well, these will help. Armor-piercing ballistic capped shells. Less damage, but much more pin. I don't know if that makes me want to just run and refit everything, but that's definitely something to include next time we do refit the capital ships. Oh, by the way, it was off camera as I was advancing time, but we've also picked up the next generation. We've also picked up RDF, radio direction finding, which is useful because it's not quite radar. You don't get a position, but you do get a direction, right? You're picking up their radio signals. Not like breaking, not crypto, but you're just picking up the electromagnetic energy and you get a bearing to where they are. So that is helpful. And then it also further improves aiming speed. So that's another one that not quite worth a refit on its own, but definitely worth thinking about adding when we do another refit. So we're slowly piling up a few more techs here that will be useful in the future. Yeah, this makes no sense whatsoever. These are holdovers from the previous war on these VP. So I can't, I hope that this isn't actually factoring into, Italy thinks it's losing, therefore it starts trying to make peace with France. Kind of hypothetically, the AI player that France is looking on the right side of their screen and seeing 0 versus 0 VP in their current war with Italy. Whether that's true, I don't know if that's happening or not. Okay, well, let's just advance to the next month and see. No. We need to do something else here. We need to put our fleet into a posture. Now that we have ports in the West Med, it seems like we can probably expect to start losing transports over there. Currently, it says France has 1 DD in the East Med. I don't see where it is. It can't be in port because they don't have any ports, but I don't see that there's a fleet in the East Med. So the question is, we have 3 destroyer squadrons and 2 battle cruisers in the West Med, and then they'll soon be joined by 2 more battleships in the West Med. And so the question is, do I surge these forces out in invade mode, which is actually more of a commerce raiding? Yeah, it generates more us attacking their convoys battles. I think that's the way I read the tooltip, and may also have an impact on the monthly transport losses. I'm not sure. Or do we go out into protect mode, which should generate more, protecting our own convoy battles and lessening our own transport losses? I'm not sure. So I'm not sure exactly what to do in terms of their mode with basically our West Med forces. And then I also need to think about, we clearly don't need the 20,000 power projection in the East Med. I think we'll probably surge a bunch of ships over into the West Med. Not sure what I'm going to do there. What I am sure of is that's going to happen in the next episode. Okay, we've had our, we had our peacetime modernization of the fleet, and that fleet is largely in place, just waiting for completion of a couple battleships. And we've had our second road to war. And war has arrived with France, and we'll get that kicked off in the next episode. If you like what we're doing with the channel, if you like the content, then leave a like, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe. If you're new to the series and want to see other episodes in this series that you may not have seen, I'm linking the playlist here. At any rate, thank you very, very much for watching. I really do appreciate it.